Hello, everyone. Now, I'm going to attempt to give you a little insight about the Middle Ages and maybe a little bit of the Renaissance. I'm going to try to, because I can understand these dynasties get a little confusing. So let's see if I can do this in a way that makes sense. Okay? One of the early dynasties of the Middle Ages was the Merovingians. They were an offshoot of the Franks that came from southern Europe. They moved into Western Europe and they conquered all over the place. And as a result, they were the ones to dominate at first, around the 400s, 500s AD. Now, what's interesting to note is they were pagans, which means that they didn't follow Christianity. They didn't accept Christianity as the religion. They had a belief in many gods. And they also grew longer hair. They were called the long-haired kings because for them, this was an opportunity. They believed it had something to do with a mystical power, a power that they couldn't. It's hard to explain it, but it was. It's kind of like a way that they saw their ability to have their power, and so they had sometimes hair down to here or longer and many wives. Now, one of the more, I would say, famous of the, well, one of the famous ones was Clovis, but before Clovis, we'll talk about Clovis in a minute, was Merovich. Now, the reason why I bring up Merovich is that he's almost a mystical figure. There's not much known about Merovich, Merevich, because he's like a legendary figure who had almost superhuman characteristics. But his was kind of the start, and then his kids came along, and one of those would be Clovis. And Clovis was going to be influenced by his soon-to-be wife, his would-be wife, Clotilda. He married her, and what's interesting about Clotilda and Clovis is that he was a pagan out fighting, and she was a Catholic Christian. And she was so devoted to her faith that she baptized two of her sons secretly. Now, eventually, she worked on him. She convinced her husband to convert over to Catholicism. And so in 496, at Christmas Day, he got baptized. What's important about that is the next thing that happened. When he went out to fight, he went out with his band of warriors. And his band of warriors are called the Kumas. Whenever they conquered land, they would divide up the territories. Tricky part of dividing up territories is it tends to weaken those. If you divide it up too much, you can weaken the territory. Well, when he had kids, that sort of changed because he then divided it up among the kid boys, among the guys. Now, here's the tricky part. There was a practice called progenitor, where you made sure that the male heir, the one man, the oldest son, was to inherit everything, which wasn't a good idea, but that was a practice. Clovis didn't do that. He divided it amongst his sons. But still, there was that threat of dividing up the land that could make it weak. Well, ironically, when his sons were old enough to inherit, three of them died before they could pass on to their kids. So one of his sons actually took it. I think his name was Clothar. His son took the land and was able to, he too, divided it up amongst his children. Now, one of the children would be called Siegbert, who would marry Brumatilda. Trying to get all these names right for you to understand. Brumatilda was a crazy character, a woman. Brumatilda did a lot of good things. She helped missionaries. She built churches. But she also did some wacko things, like married a nephew and also had a bishop killed because he disagreed with her. She did some strange things. And as a result of her wacky behavior. She was doing this for decades. She ruled through herself and through her sons and grandsons and great grandsons. There were a group of people in her realm of influence. They got tired of it. Now, amongst those people is what they call the man of the palace, mayor of the palace. Excuse me, mayor of the palace. The mayor of the palace was somebody who was like a chief of staff. It's like if you're the king, you got an assistant. Or if you're a governor, you got an assistant. Or you're assistant, or senator assistant. That chief of staff runs things. Well, the mayor of the palace was like a chief of staff. And what happened was a bunch of these got together and they decided enough was enough. They basically overthrew Brumhilda and started their own. And as a result, and you got to remember, at the same time, Brumhilda was one of those they overthrew. But the rest of the Merovingians were starting to die out, and their empire was starting to collapse. So that's where the Carolingians came in. The Carolingians came in because of the fact that Brumhilda had been overthrown, and these mayors of the palace started to take control. And then from these mayors of the palace, you get the Carolingians. Well, among these Carolingians was Pepin, one of the kings, and then Charles Martel. And here's what's interesting. I think you might find fascinating. Charles Martel was a warrior king. Well, he made sure he had good relationships with Rome and the Pope. That was very important to him. So what he did was he gave some land to the Pope. He gave some land to what are now called papal states down in Rome area, the area of Rome, and that has stayed with them since then. We still see them; they're still a part of the papal land, papal states. That was something Charles Martel did, and what it did, it really linked the kings with the papacy, with the Roman Catholic Church. Now, give them a couple more kids, grandkids, and guess who comes along? Charles Martel's grandson is Charlemagne, that very famous king that everybody talks about. And he too, he would eventually become the Holy Roman Empire. They're very in thick with the Roman Catholic Church. What's interesting about that is Charlemagne was a warrior king, but he was also a smart warrior king. He knew that he needed to take care of the details of the people. He needed to make sure that the laws were proper. He made sure that people had fairness in their laws. He made sure that he got markets open for them. He made sure that they had an opportunity to learn new things and have a little bit of education and a little bit of a culture of life. In fact, something called the Carolingian Renaissance took place, whereby there you had Charlemagne able to invite different ideas in culture, art, literature, so that people can learn more than just the basics of life. Well, when he passed away, Charlemagne passed away, his land was passed on to his kids, and eventually they got too thin, too many people owned land, everything was divided, and the land that was belonged to Charlemagne's family collapsed. That fell apart. The Carolingian dynasty fell apart. And as a result, we had feudalism. Feudalism with all the manors and little fiefdoms and all the nobles, and they're all having a lot of violence amongst each other because there was no central governing authority. That lasted for quite a long time. And then eventually, later on, we had the Renaissance, which is the age of reasoning, but that's a long way away. The point is, folks, this gives you a summary of what's been happening. Yes, there's still more to talk about, but it gives you an idea, general idea of what was happening as a result of first the Merovingians being the dynasty in charge, then the Carolingians, and then feudalism, and then finally, eventually, a long way away, the Renaissance. A lot of stuff in a long period of time. Talk to you later. Hope you got all that. Got any questions? Let me know. Thank you.